Okay, so have you ever had that feeling like something is just off?
Yeah.
Like just a little bit.
Yeah.
That feeling that maybe tells you to like take a closer look?
Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so imagine that feeling like magnified 1,000 times, and it's happening in the middle of the night in a security operations center.
Oh, yeah.
So our source material starts with this really compelling story about Sarah,
Okay.
who is this seasoned security analyst, and she's noticing this tiny little flicker
Huh.
in the authentication logs at like 2:10 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And, at first she's like, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just a blip.
Right.
But it turns out that single anomaly was like the tip of this huge iceberg.
Oh, wow.
This really sophisticated attack that was able to like morph its signature,
Oh, God.
its communication methods,
Wow.
even like its evasion tactics,
Hi.
like 12 times during this intrusion.
Right.
12 times.
Wow.
And get this, their state-of-the-art detection platform
Yeah.
only caught 4 of those variations.
Oh, my.
4 out of 12.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is exactly what I was talking about last week, right? It just goes to show how quickly things are changing in the world of cybersecurity.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's not like the bad guys just got like a minor upgrade.
Right?
Like this is a whole new ball game.
Absolutely. It's completely changed the way we have to think about defense.
Totally. And the source even calls it an invisible chess match.
Ooh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because remember how we used to approach cybersecurity? It was kind of like this move, counter move kind of dance.
Yeah. Attacker does something, we create a signature to block it. They tweak it a little bit. We update the signature and so on.
Exactly. And it was, relatively predictable.
Right.
But now with AI,
Yeah.
these adversaries, they can make a whole bunch of moves before our defenses can even react.
That's the real challenge with this invisible chess match, isn't it? It's like playing speed chess against a grandmaster.
That's a really good analogy.
You're trying to make your move, and they've already made 10? It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it makes it almost impossible to keep upright.
It really does.
And, the piece gives this really stark example,
Okay.
this manufacturing client.
Right.
And there were no slouches in the security department.
Right.
They had the next-gen firewall,
Yep.
EDR,
Uh-huh.
a SIEM with machine learning,
Okay.
regular testing.
So they were doing all the right things, it sounds like.
They were.
Wow.
They really were doing everything by the book,
And they still got hit.
and they still got hit.
Wow. That's worrying. What happened?
So it was this AI-powered attack.
Okay.
So even with their SIEM that was using machine learning to learn and identify patterns, it wasn't enough.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't enough this time.
And this wasn't like some run-of-the-mill malware either.
So it was something more advanced then?
Way more advanced.
Okay.
It could actually dynamically shift its tactics based on like whatever defenses it encountered.
So it was like learning as it was going.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a game changer.
It was able to modify its own code, like its communication channels,
God.
and how it was able to like maintain its foothold on the network,
Oh,
all
wow.
to just fly under the radar,
Yeah, stay completely hidden.
And the client's security team said it best.
What did they say?
They said they felt like they were fighting a ghost.
Oh, wow. That is the perfect analogy.
Isn't it?
You can't punch a ghost. You can't block a ghost. You don't even know where it is half the time.
Exactly. And that is the real like core difficulty here.
Yeah.
It's that their existing tools, which were designed to spot those known patterns,
Right.
they were basically useless.
Right. Because this thing was constantly changing and evolving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that brings us to like the heart of our conversation today, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we understand these fundamental shifts that AI is bringing to the cybersecurity battlefield? And
importantly, what can we actually do about it?
exactly.
I mean, I'm already getting chills just thinking about all this. I can't imagine being on the front lines dealing with these kinds of threats.
Yeah. It's pretty scary stuff.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it really makes you question everything you thought you knew about cybersecurity.
It does. It really does.
But where do we even begin?
Well, let's start by digging a little deeper into this whole invisible chess match idea.
Okay.
Because the source outlines what they're calling 3 fundamental shifts.
Okay.
And the first one is this velocity revolution.
The velocity revolution. Okay.
So traditionally, attacks, they unfolded over hours, days,
Right.
sometimes even weeks. Right.
Yeah. And that gave defenders that really crucial time to spot the breach,
Right.
and hopefully cut it off before any real damage was done.
Exactly. And that slower pace, it was really key because it allowed for like human intervention, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the whole point of incident response, right?
Yeah.
Analysts had time to investigate alerts, put together the pieces of the puzzle and figure out how to stop the attack.
Totally. But with AI-powered attacks,
Hmm.
that window has like completely slammed shut.
So you're saying there's no time to react anymore?
Pretty much.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because these AI attacks, they operate at machine speed.
Right.
So what used to take days or weeks now happens in minutes or even seconds.
Oh, my goodness.
And the source gives this crazy example
Okay.
from a tabletop exercise they did with a financial services client.
Mm-hmm.
So they simulated a conventional APT.
You know those advanced persistent threats that we're all so familiar with?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And it took about 4 hours for them to get from initial access to like potential data exfiltration.
Okay, 4 hours. That's still pretty fast, but I guess manageable.
Right, but the AI-augmented version,
Yeah.
under 18 minutes.
18 minutes. That's insane.
Isn't that crazy?
That's faster than it takes to, like, order a pizza.
I know. It's
And-
faster than it takes to assemble a conference call.
That's terrifying.
I know. And it's like what we were talking about before with that chess analogy, right?
Yeah. Like, your opponent is making 20 moves for every one of yours.
Exactly.
That just completely overwhelms any kind of human-driven response. There's just no way to keep up with that kind of speed.
There's really not. And it brings us to that second fundamental shift,
Okay.
which is what they're calling the creativity expansion.
Creativity expansion, what's that about?
So it's not just about speed with AI.
Okay.
It's also about like a whole new level of ingenuity.
Oh, wow.
Because AI can actually explore combinations of techniques that human attackers might never even think of.
Really? So they're not just faster, they're also smarter.
Exactly. And that's where like everything we know about cyber defense just gets flipped on its head.
Okay, explain that a little bit more.
So, human attackers, they tend to rely on like established playbooks.
Right, they use the tactics and techniques that have worked for them in the past.
Exactly.
Okay.
But AI can actually analyze this huge amount of data
Right?
on different attack methods
Yeah.
and identify totally new combinations. It's basically creating attack patterns that we've never seen before.
So we're not just talking about tweaking existing methods, it's creating entirely new approaches.
Exactly.
That is scary.
And the source has this crazy example
Okay.
about this AI orchestrated campaign that blended elements from 5 different known attack frameworks.
5 different frameworks.
And in these like completely unprecedented ways.
That's like mixing and matching different martial arts to come up with a completely new fighting style.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. The AI wasn't programmed to do this.
So it wasn't like someone sat down and coded this specific attack.
Nope. It actually discovered this approach through something called reinforcement learning.
Reinforcement learning.
So it's basically where the AI learns through trial and error
Oh, wow.
to find the most effective methods.
So it's teaching itself to be a better attacker.
Exactly.
That's both impressive and terrifying at the same time.
It really is. And that's a key point here, right? Because it means that defenders can't just rely on understanding the attack methods that we already know about.
Right, because the threat landscape is changing so rapidly and becoming so unpredictable.
Yeah.
It's like trying to prepare for a fight based on your opponent's old videos, but they've been secretly training in a whole new style that you've never seen before.
That is a great analogy.
You're going to be in for a nasty surprise when the bell rings.
You definitely are. And that brings us to the third fundamental shift,
Okay.
which the source calls the democratization effect.
Democratization effect. What does that mean in this context?
So basically, it means that AI is making these advanced attack capabilities accessible to a much wider range of people.
So you're saying even less skilled attackers can now launch these sophisticated attacks?
Exactly.
Wow, that's concerning.
It really is, because historically, launching these sophisticated attacks, it required a lot of resources.
Right, deep technical knowledge and often like the backing of a nation state or something.
Exactly. But now,
Yeah.
AI-powered tools are really lowering that barrier to entry.
So now anyone with a laptop and an internet connection could potentially launch a sophisticated attack.
Pretty much.
That's a game changer.
It is. And the source tells this really interesting story
Okay.
about this threat hunting engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So they uncovered this attack chain that had all the hallmarks of an APT.
Right, like the kind we usually attribute to highly skilled groups.
Right, exactly. But when they dug into the forensic evidence,
Yeah.
it pointed to this relatively inexperienced attacker.
Really?
Yeah, who had actually made some pretty basic security mistakes.
So the attacker themselves wasn't that sophisticated.
Not really, no.
Right, the attack was.
The attack was super sophisticated.
So where was the sophistication coming from?
from the AI tools they were using.
Ah, I see. So the tools were doing the heavy lifting for them.
Exactly. And the source calls this sensory dissonance for security leaders
Sensory dissonance. Okay, I like that.
because they're seeing threats that look and act like these super advanced attacks, but they're being wielded by individuals who, on their own, wouldn't have the skills to pull it off.
It's like seeing a kid riding a superbike.
Exactly.
They might not know how to build the bike or even how the engine works, but they can still go incredibly fast and do a lot of damage.
Exactly.
So we've got this perfect storm brewing, right? Attacks that are faster, more creative, and accessible to a wider range of actors. What does this mean for security teams on the ground?
Well, it's not pretty.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The source outlines 3 consistent pain points that clients are experiencing.
Okay.
The first one is detection system inadequacy.
Detection system inadequacy. What does that mean?
So remember how the opening story they were talking about Sarah and how their state-of-the-art system only caught 4 out of 12 variations of that attack?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like the core of the problem here.
Okay.
Traditional detection systems, particularly those that really heavily rely on signatures of known threats,
Right.
they're really struggling to keep up
Yeah, that makes sense.
because they're looking for these very specific, known bad patterns.
Yeah.
When the attacks are changing so quickly, they just can't keep up.
So it's like trying to catch a chameleon with a net. It keeps changing its colors and blending in.
Exactly. And one CISO put it this way.
How'd they put it?
They said it's like trying to catch water with a sieve.
Oh, wow. That's a really powerful image.
Isn't it?
It really captures the futility of using old methods against these new threats.
Totally. And the result is often alert fatigue.
Right, because the systems are generating so many false positives.
Exactly.
It's like the boy who cried wolf. Eventually, you start ignoring all the alerts, even the real ones.
And that's a huge problem because it means we're missing the truly significant changes.
Yeah, and the data actually backs this up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the source mentioned this one assessment where a client's security setup blocked 94% of standard penetration testing attempts.
Wow. 94%. That sounds pretty good.
It does,
Yeah.
right. But then they brought in an AI-augmented red team that was able to dynamically adapt its techniques in real time.
So basically like a real-world AI-powered attack.
Exactly.
Okay, and how did the security setup do against that?
Their success rate plummeted to just 36%.
36%. That's a huge drop.
It is, right. And it really shows the limitations of relying solely on these traditional detection methods.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the second pain point,
Okay.
which is playbook obsolescence.
Playbook obsolescence.
Yeah, so incident response, it's long relied on having these established procedures.
Right, the step-by-step playbooks for dealing with common attacks.
Right, exactly. And those have been like a cornerstone of incident response.
Yeah, they provide a sense of order and a clear path forward during what can be a really chaotic situation.
Totally. But as one security operations manager said,
Yeah.
and this quote really stuck with me,
Okay, what was it?
they said, "Our playbooks have become obsolete mid-incident."
Wow, obsolete mid-incident, that's rough.
I know, and it really highlights the problem, right?
Yeah, because when these attacks are mutating so rapidly, those fixed procedures, they just don't apply anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, if your playbook says like, okay, when you see this specific type of malware communication happening, immediately isolate the affected system and then run this specific cleanup script.
Right.
But the malware has already changed its communication method
Yeah.
and even like its core code,
Yeah.
then that entire playbook becomes useless.
Totally useless, like instantly.
It's like trying to follow a recipe where the ingredients keep changing while you're cooking.
Exactly. And the source gives an example of a healthcare client
Okay.
whose average incident containment time had doubled in the past year.
Doubled. Wow.
And it wasn't because their team was suddenly less capable.
So what was it then?
It was because they were constantly running into these new variations of attacks.
Right, that their playbooks just didn't cover.
Exactly, and that constant need to improvise.
Yeah.
It puts a real psychological burden on response teams.
Oh, yeah. I to imagine that would be really stressful. Yeah, it leads to a much higher risk of burnout.
Absolutely, because security professionals are trained to follow procedures, to
Yeah.
have a plan.
Yeah.
So when that foundation is constantly shifting beneath them,
Yeah.
it creates a lot of stress and uncertainty.
And it makes them less effective.
Right.
And that leads us to the third pain point,
Okay.
skills gap amplification.
Skills gap amplification.
So we already know that there's this huge shortage of skilled cybersecurity professionals.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem that's been going on for years.
It has, and AI-powered threats are just making that problem even worse.
Because they're requiring a whole new level of expertise?
Exactly.
Okay.
And a whole new way of thinking about security.
So it's not just about needing to hire more people, it's about needing people with different skills.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Because the skills that were so valuable in that old move, counter move era.
Right, like recognizing specific patterns and meticulously following procedures.
Exactly. Those are becoming less and less effective.
And it's not just entry-level folks who are feeling this, right?
Yeah.
Even seasoned professionals are having to adapt.
Exactly. And the source quotes this veteran security analyst
Okay.
with over 15 years of experience.
Wow, so this is someone who's seen it all.
Right.
Okay.
And they said, quote, "For the first time in my career, I feel like a beginner again."
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
Isn't it?
It really shows how much things have changed.
And it highlights this real crisis of confidence
Yeah.
that's happening within the security community.
And of course, it just makes the talent shortage even worse.
Exactly.
So it sounds like we're in a pretty dire situation.
Does sound pretty bleak, right?
AI-powered attacks are evolving so rapidly that our defenses are struggling to keep up.
Right.
We're dealing with alert fatigue, our playbooks are obsolete, and there aren't enough skilled people to fight these new threats.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It really is.
But, the piece doesn't just leave us in this, state of doom and gloom.
Oh, good, because I was starting to get really depressed.
Yeah, no, it actually offers this message of optimism.
Okay.
And it highlights some really effective strategies
Okay, tell me more.
that forward-thinking organizations are starting to adopt right now.
I am all ears.
So the first key strategy is a shift from signature detection to behavioral analysis.
Okay, from signature detection to behavioral analysis. So what does that mean exactly?
So instead of just focusing on looking for those very specific known bad patterns,
Right, like those digital fingerprints of an attack.
exactly, the focus shifts to identifying abnormal or potentially malicious behavior,
Okay.
regardless of how it's actually being carried out.
So it's less about what the attack looks like and more about how it behaves.
Exactly. And it's about understanding what normal looks like
Okay.
for a particular user, a specific device, or the entire network.
Yeah.
And then being able to flag anything that deviates from that baseline.
Ah, I see. So if a user suddenly starts accessing files they've never touched before, or if a device starts communicating with a suspicious server, that would raise a red flag.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the source gives this great example of a retail client
Okay.
who saw a 64% reduction in their detection gap by focusing on these key behavioral indicators.
64%, that's a huge improvement.
It is.
So what kind of behavioral indicators were they looking at?
So things like unusual authentication patterns.
Right, so like someone logging in from a new location at a weird hour.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or attempts to gain higher level administrative access.
Yeah, privilege escalation no matter what method they use. Unusual patterns of data access or movement.
So if someone starts downloading huge amounts of data or accessing sensitive files they've never touched before.
Right.
Okay.
And unexpected relationships between different processes running on a system.
Interesting. So if a normally low privilege process suddenly spawns a high privilege process, that would be suspicious.
That's really smart.
Yeah, and it's all about looking for those subtle clues
Right.
that might indicate something malicious is going on.
Yeah, even if it doesn't perfectly match a known attack signature.
Exactly. And one important thing to note,
Yeah.
this isn't like an instant fix.
Okay.
So the source mentions this typical 4 to 8 week initial baselining period.
So that's where the system is learning what normal looks like.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's a tuning phase to fine-tune the system and minimize those false positives.
Right, because too many false positives can be just as bad as not enough alerts.
Totally. And interestingly, the UK's National Cybersecurity Center, in their 2023 report, they found that organizations that were using behavioral detection saw a 57% improvement in their mean time to detect sophisticated threats.
57%, that's a significant improvement.
It is, and it really shows the potential of this approach.
It really does.
So the second key strategy is moving from static playbooks to adaptive response frameworks.
Right, because we talked earlier about how those rigid playbooks are becoming obsolete.
Exactly. And the shift here is towards developing these more flexible, objective-based frameworks.
Okay, so instead of having this detailed checklist
Right.
for every single possible attack scenario,
Yep.
the focus is on defining the desired outcome.
Exactly.
Yep.
So things like containing the attack, preventing data loss, maintaining business operations.
Right. So it's about focusing on the goals rather than the specific steps to get there.
Exactly, and then developing a range of different tactical options
Okay.
that can be used to achieve those objectives.
So it's like having a toolbox full of different tools
Right.
that you can use depending on the specific situation.
Exactly, and the source gives an example of this manufacturing client.
Okay. The one that was hit with the AI-powered attack.
Right.
Okay.
And they totally revamped their entire incident response approach.
Okay. How did they do that?
So they focused on 5 core objectives,
Okay.
containing lateral movement within their network.
So stopping the attackers from spreading.
Exactly.
Really?
Absolutely, preventing any data exfiltration.
Right. Making sure no sensitive data leaves the network.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Maintaining business operations.
So keeping the lights on even during an attack.
Yep.
Okay.
Preserving evidence for later analysis.
Right. So they can figure out what happened and how to prevent it from happening again.
Exactly.
Okay.
And ensuring a quick and complete restoration of normal operations.
So basically getting back to business as usual as quickly as possible.
Exactly. And for each of those objectives,
Yeah.
they developed a bunch of different tactical options
Okay.
that their teams could choose from.
Depending on the specific attack they were facing.
Exactly.
That's a really smart approach. It gives them a lot of flexibility to adapt to whatever comes their way.
And it really worked.
No, yeah.
Yeah, their internal metrics showed a 58% reduction in their containment time for new attack types compared to their old playbook approach.
58%. That's huge.
It is, right?
It really highlights how important it is to be able to adapt on the fly
Totally.
rather than being stuck with a rigid plan that no longer applies.
And the third key strategy is moving from human-only to human-AI collaboration.
Human AI collaboration. Okay, so you're not saying that we should just replace all our security analysts with AI.
No, definitely not.
Okay, good, because I was getting a little worried there.
Yeah, because the piece emphasizes that the most effective solution is actually a partnership.
Between humans and AI.
Exactly.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice?
So human analysts, they bring that critical thinking skills,
Right.
deep understanding of context,
Hmm.
and the ability to handle those novel situations that an AI might not have seen before.
Okay.
And AI, on the other hand, it's really good at processing tons of data at super high speeds,
Yeah.
identifying subtle patterns that humans might miss,
Right.
and automating those really repetitive tasks.
Okay.
So it's about combining those strengths.
So it's not about humans versus AI, it's about humans and AI working together.
Exactly. And the financial services client that we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
they actually implemented an AI-powered assistant tool.
An AI assistant for cybersecurity. That's interesting.
It is, right?
So what does this AI assistant actually do?
So it automatically analyzes new attack patterns as they're detected,
Okay.
suggests potential containment strategies,
Wow.
and even recommends specific response actions.
So it's like having a super smart sidekick who's constantly analyzing the threat landscape and suggesting the best course of action.
Exactly.
That sounds incredibly helpful.
It is, and it uses these really sophisticated machine learning algorithms
Okay.
to spot similarities between new attacks and previously known techniques.
Even if the details of the attack are different?
Exactly. And it can also evaluate different containment options
Okay.
based on their likely effectiveness and their potential impact on business operations.
So it's not just suggesting random actions, it's actually thinking strategically about the best way to respond.
Exactly.
That's really impressive.
And it's also integrated with threat intelligence feeds.
So it's always up to date on the latest threats.
Exactly. But here's the really important part.
Okay.
The human analysts still have the final say.
So the AI is just a tool to help them make better decisions.
Exactly. It's not replacing them.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the results have been really amazing.
How so?
So this client, they reported a 47% reduction in their containment time.
47%!
That's incredible.
And they also saw a decrease in analyst burnout rates.
That's a really important point. It shows that the AI is not just improving efficiency, it's also improving the lives of the people who are using it
Exactly.
by taking over some of those tedious and time-consuming tasks
Right.
and freeing up the human analysts to focus on those higher-level strategic decisions.
And it's not just this one client, right?
Right.
Organizations like the UK's NCSC.
Yeah.
They're also advocating for these augmented intelligence approaches.
And they're saying that this combination of human judgment and machine processing consistently outperforms either one on their own. Exactly.
Right.
So it's not about humans versus machines. It's about humans and machines working together.
That's a powerful message.
It is. And, it's really clear that the cybersecurity landscape has been completely transformed by AI.
It has, and I think it's safe to say that things are only going to get more complex from here.
Totally. But here's the key takeaway, right?
Okay.
Even though the tactics and techniques of attack have changed,
Yeah.
the overarching objective of cybersecurity remains the same.
What
It's
is
all about managing risk
Right.
to protect and enable business operations.
So it's not about chasing the latest shiny object.
Right.
It's about focusing on the fundamentals. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, achieving perfect prevention against these AI-powered threats,
Yeah.
it's probably not realistic.
Right, because the attackers always have an advantage.
Yeah, they're always going to be one step ahead.
They're constantly innovating and finding new ways to exploit vulnerabilities.
And that means that we need to shift our mindset
Okay.
away from this prevention obsession
Right.
and towards a more resilience focus.
Resilience focus.
So instead of trying to prevent every single attack,
Yeah.
we need to focus on building systems that can contain the damage
Yeah.
and maintain operations even if an attack does succeed.
So it's about accepting that breaches are going to happen and being prepared to minimize the impact.
Exactly. And this means designing security architectures that limit the blast radius of an attack,
Okay.
implementing measures to ensure business continuity,
Yeah.
and having robust recovery plans in place.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the source cites a 2024 study by the University of Cambridge
Okay.
that found that organizations with these resilience-focused architectures,
Yeah.
they experienced 62% less business impact from breaches.
62%. That's a huge difference.
It is, and it shows the power of this approach.
It really does.
So as this invisible chess match continues,
Yeah.
with both sides using AI,
Right.
the winners are going to be the ones who can adapt.
So those who can embrace behavioral detection, adaptive response, and human AI collaboration.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the landscape has changed and being willing to change with it.
So it's not just about technology, it's about mindset.
It's about both.
I like that.
So here's a final thought for you.
Okay, I'm listening.
Looking at your own organization's security strategy,
Yeah.
how is it evolving to address these AI-powered threats?
That's a good question.
Because the question is no longer if you're going to face these threats.
Right.
It's whether your strategy is ready for them.
That's something for everyone to think about.
It really is.